the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Stephanie Moss. I am so excited to be on the Business Story of the Week.
Fantastic. And that is the lovely Stephanie Moss. Dr. Stephanie Moss. I am very excited for our show. Of course, I am your host. My name is Joshua, your host for every day, every week, every episode where we ask a question. And today's question is, what does it mean to humanize medicine in today's healthcare system? And this, I feel, is the perfect question. And Dr. Stephanie Moss is the perfect guest to answer that question for today. Dr. Stephanie Moss is a first year psychiatry resident at Rosalind Franklin University, passionate about mental health advocacy and addressing disparities for marginalized communities. Co-founder of the Chicago Homelessness and Health Response Group for Equity, she also contributes to organizations like American Psychiatric Association and Tight Lipped. As a public speaker, writer, and podcast host of Life as a Patient Doctor, Dr. Moss shares her insight on humanizing medicine, drawing from experiences as a Latina, first generation doctor, and endometriosis warrior. Dr. Stephanie Moss, you're looking lovely today. Thank you for coming on the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to speak on all those things that you mentioned.
Dr. Stephanie, of course, I'm quite excited. I'm loving the energy today. I always start the show this way. And what I always ask is, what was the young Stephanie like? Was the young Stephanie always into medicine? Was she always interested in the medical field? Was she always this bubbly and energetic and enthusiastic? But also, what would a young Stephanie say to the Stephanie of today?
Very good question. So starting just with the first question of medicine, no. I have no one in the medical field in my own family, so medicine never came to the forefront. I was a science and math girl growing up in school, even though my father it was not a scientist. He had his master's in business, but he knew math. And I think because he always encouraged me to learn more, he would go to the library with me where we would learn on whatever was fascinating me. So I remember my very first science project I did in kindergarten. Yes, kindergarten. So 5 years old. In kindergarten was something to do, we had to count to 100. And make a poster on it, 100. And I learned about the centipede. Centipede has 100 legs. And so my dad took me to the library and we looked up a book on centipedes. And that was kind of the first step of learning about science, biology. And all through elementary school, middle school, and high school, I didn't do science projects in high school, but a lot in elementary. I did every single year from elementary and middle school year. And so I was very set on biology, thinking maybe PhD in biology. Part of me liked the idea of being an astronaut. I think around the same time, there was a lot of spaceships going up. So I was interested in maybe being an astronaut. Wow. And it wasn't until high school, late high school, like senior year high school, where I saw one of the teachers at my school have a seizure, and I was a part of the emergency response team. And that kind of motivated me to get my EMT and start looking at the path to medicine. And so that's a quick idea of my path in my pre-adult years.
Pre-adult years. It's very cool, by the way. It sounds to me like you've always been a dreamer. The young Stephanie was always a dreamer. She was interested in things. She was enthusiastic with things that she was interested about, but also that little pivotal moment there where your teacher has a seizure and that led you down the path of medicine shows me or sounds to me like Stephanie was also a passionate person. She was also quite someone that is always looking out for others. Like the compassion has always been there. And Stephanie, you have now achieved your dream of being a doctor. What
Yeah.
was that? What was that like? What was the road like? For our audience and listeners out there who knows or who have spread in the med school, it's not easy. It's quite difficult. But now you have achieved that dream. You're a first year resident doctor. What was that journey like? I understand that you've navigated your own, you've navigated chronic health conditions as well, and of course, this has led you influence your approach to medicine, psychiatry, and advocacy. Talk to us a little bit about that, and how has that shaped your journey today?
Of course. I think it's important to note, like I said before, I did not have anyone in my family in medicine who's ever had, who even nursing, nothing. And so my path was all about me of
Wow.
trial, failure, and keep going. And
Mm,
so
imagine.
a lot of it from college. I was very lucky that my boyfriend at the time, now husband, also wanted to go to medical school. So
Wow.
having that support system, both
Hmm.
of us motivated each other through our different challenges of pre-med, challenges with the organic chemistry, biology. Same thing applying to medical school. The first MCAT I failed, and that's the exam to actually get into medical school. But
Right.
thankfully, because he was willing to do, he also did not do the best at MCAT, so we both restudied, retook
Hmm.
it, got into medical school, got into multiple actually med schools,
Hmm.
because we applied together all over the country, and we were just motivated to go anywhere as long as we could do it together. And
Wow,
having
it's
that
beautiful.
strong support system by going to the same medical school together, um, was imperative to my journey, even
Hmm.
as I struggled throughout medical school, bring in COVID, struggle with passing exams, struggle with being able to even stay in medical school. There was a point between my second and third year that I was struggling so much to be able to pass the exam in the advent of COVID, in the advent of my own new
Of
diagnosed
course.
medical conditions, new diagnosed
Hmm.
mental health conditions.
Hmm.
I needed to take a step back from medical school as he
Oh my.
continued on with his medical journey.
Hmm.
I had the opportunity to step back, and that was additional ridiculous
Hmm.
struggle, because we had before two incomes, because we were taking out student loans, so both of us had
Yes.
incomes, and now just one of us have student incomes. And
Right.
for those who don't know, we only get like $15,000 a year, so that's no way to
My.
live.
Wow.
And both of us would have been 30, but without. So we struggled a lot,
Hmm.
struggled financially, had
Hmm.
to go to a really dark place where
Hmm.
we had to go on food stamps, we went on Medicaid, we were at a point that we were practically at risk of being homeless and getting kicked out, because we
Wow.
just couldn't afford our
Wow.
rent. And
Unbelievable.
all during this, I'm still studying for my step exam, which was important to
Wow.
be able to go on with my medical career. He was at
Mhm.
this point third year medical school. So yeah, all the different struggles. Eventually passed the exam, went back to school. 2-3 years later, be able to graduate med school, and then I was able to find a specialty and a program that appreciated me for me, appreciated my
Mhm.
own struggles, and believed in me. And
And
I think we'll talk about later the humanity medicine. I think that was really imperative
mhm.
to that. I had to see humanity myself,
Mhm.
and find a program who would also see me as a human, and
Mhm.
trust that my story was good enough,
Mhm.
for them to believe in me to be a doctor at their institution.
Wow, that is fascinating. I mean, you went through all of that. It's difficult. It's terrifying, but the support was
Mm,
there. I mean, that is, I feel, is what we need in life. We all just need a good support system to help push us through, but that doesn't make it, that doesn't guarantee success that we will make through it. But you did. You did, Dr. Stephanie, and I'm very happy. Shout out to Miss, of course, to,
Dr. Moss.
Dr.
Dr.
Moss. There you go. Correct. Correction. Shout out to Dr. Moss because without him, we probably wouldn't have the opportunity to have you on here on the show. And of course, you push through with your compassion and with your own, advocacy. Stephanie, talk to us about that. I want to lay down the framework here because what we're trying to answer here is how do we humanize medicine in the healthcare system today? I want to know what influenced this approach of yours. What were the conditions that you had to struggle through, that you had to go through, but also what were the struggles personally and externally? You talked about not being accepted for who you are and having to find programs that accepted that human part of you, that saw you as a human part. I want to dive deep into this advocacy, but help me lay out the framework first. What influenced this approach of yours?
I think it goes back to actually my college years when I
Mm-hmm.
was in college. Because I'm still taking out student loans at this point, I had to work. And I ended up working as a caregiver for the elderly, for the older adults in assisted living, memory care, independent living healthcare. And that was the first time that I really had to step outside of myself
Mm-hmm.
as an individual and care for someone else. See someone struggling, and even if they were not the nicest to me, I remember specifically one of my first individuals that I worked with. She was kind of nasty, and a lot of caregivers did not like working with her because she was struggling and emotionally, and she would yell at us. She would say bad words to us, bad things, but it was important to recognize her that she was struggling,
She was
that
struggling.
her outward expression of anger,
Yes.
frustration, putting it on us wasn't
Yes.
about us. It was about her internal pain. And the
Yes.
only way that she did not feel like she had any power. She was left in a home. She couldn't walk. She was in a wheelchair. Sometimes she
Wow.
was bedbound.
Mhm.
And so she had lost a lot of power and
Yes.
autonomy.
Mhm.
And it was through that experience that I had to really step outside my own emotions of being hurt from the painful things she was
Yes.
saying and just see her as a human. And so I
Mm.
think that through that experience, like I said, I worked in that field for 4 years,
Mhm.
all during college. That really
Wow.
transformed kind of my look on life. And then
Yes.
there was different experiences later on. For example, you mentioned earlier
Mhm.
caring for the homeless during the COVID
Mhm.
pandemic. That was the people who were unsheltered were at the highest risk of getting COVID because they
Yes.
already had chronic health conditions. They did not have a safe place to go, shelter in place. There was no shelter in place for them.
Mhm.
And so another personal example of going through the years where I'm individually, like everyone else in the whole world, is struggling
Mhm.
with this pandemic, but through being there and seeing how we could help thousands of individuals to get what they needed was also very imperative to my own personal journey of seeing how I could be an advocate for others who did not have a voice for themselves.
That's it. That's it. If that isn't the goal of helping others, then what is? Like if that isn't our purpose in here to just help those who can't help themselves, and what are we doing? And as healthcare givers as well, that must be 10 times. The desire to help must be 10 times stronger than most individuals, and the kind of like the feelings, the emotions that come with it is much more difficult to handle. I feel because there are more, but at the same time you have to do it. You have to do it for the people who are in need, people who need help. Stephanie, my question now is what I hear, by the way, and with your story and how you tell it, when humanizing people or when humanizing medicine today, the goal is to see them as a not a human, not just as a patient, as an individual, right? And not with not just with sickness or illnesses, they also have their emotions, they have their stories, they are struggling, like you said, and it's difficult to take yourself out of that situation because you have your emotions as well. But in that dynamic, that patient doctor dynamic, it feels like you have to put them first because they need help more than I do right now. And I love that. I feel like that is your story. It's just shaping up that how your story, how you're approaching humanizing medicine. Stephanie, talk to us a little bit more about this because I want to be able to uh, communicate it more better to our audience and listeners out there. Of course, your podcast, by the way, is called Life as a Patient Doctor. I wanted to know, like, what is your goal creating this podcast, and how does it contribute to your advocacy of humanizing medicine?
Yeah, and it's so interesting. This podcast was nowhere in my goal or my dream.
Wow.
I actually was always scared of speaking on camera.
Mm-hmm.
I've been an actress. Like when I was in high school, I loved being on a stage,
Wow.
singing, dancing, acting. But when it came to a camera, I
Mm-hmm.
got so scared I could not do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was through my leave of absence, through COVID, I found writing as as a therapeutic form for me for managing my own health and wellness, mentally and physically. And so I started sharing my writing, sharing my humanity, my story on my website, medpsychmoss.com. And it was very I received a lot of positive words from other
Wow.
medical students, other people saying thank you for sharing your story, thank you for talking
Mm-hmm.
about things that are not talked about, that are stigmatized, that
Mm-hmm.
I'm struggling with too, but I don't know where to go. And after receiving so many positive messages, I wanted to make it more available to other individuals. And I was recommended to record myself. At this point, I was doing a lot of audiobooks. And so I was like, I can just audiobook my blog post. So that was the original thought of recording myself of reading my own writing. And as I started doing that, I learned this video podcast was taking off. So then it kind of created itself into a
Wow.
video podcast. So that was kind of the first motivation, is just turning my own story into being more accessible for
Mm-hmm.
other individuals, because not everyone can sit and read for forever. It's just
Mm-hmm.
reality. No one has
Mm-hmm.
time, especially in medicine. You don't have time. But
Of
maybe you have
course.
time to listen on the drive to school or the drive to
Mm-hmm.
work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so as I started doing that, because I'm also having conversations with other medical students online on social media, I
Mm-hmm.
start realizing that other people want to tell their story. They just don't have the location to. There's not really a lot of areas where people can be vulnerable to share their stories. So that's where kind of the interview aspect came in. Of I started inviting people who were already telling their story on social media, so I knew they were already a little bit willing to disclose.
Mm-hmm.
And so at first it was just going to be med students, and then I started receiving doctors who were interested, and then I started receiving other people in the healthcare system, pharmacists, nursing, caseworkers, therapists. So at this time, I've published over 45 episodes of a mix of my own experience where I'm telling my story, and then also interviews with other people sharing their story. Just like
I
you
love
said,
it.
sharing their humanity of
Mm-hmm.
not just how they got to where they are in medicine, but
Mm-hmm.
all the background behind it.
I love it. I love it. Stephanie, we love stories on the show too. That's literally the second name of the title of the show, like stories. I mean, like, stories are what makes us human. I think that stories are essential to our civilization. It's what I always say is the fabric of humanity. We make
Yeah.
sense of our experiences through stories. We make sense of the world through stories, so to speak. And people live on, memories live on through stories, and it's so important because, like you said, I feel like these stories are what humanizes, because we share stories, we get to share stories, and we give others the permission, we give others the courage to share their own stories. And I love that advocacy is always incredible. It's always invaluable to just have a platform where you can get to tell stories and others can hear their stories as well, because everyone has time to listen to a good story, right? And That is I love that you are pushing that advocacy, making that your goal with your podcast, of course. And of course, to our audience and listeners out there, the website is medpsychmoss.com, medpsychoss.com. Dr. Stephanie, where else can we find you? Where else can we connect with you? Where can we find your podcast?
Yes, so podcast is on YouTube and anywhere else you listen to your podcast, Spotify, Apple, all of them. And I to try to keep things equal to make it easy for everyone to contact me or see all my individual writing and work. I put it all on medpsychmoss.com, like you mentioned, and then all on social media. I stay at medpsychmoss, so Twitter, Instagram, or X, Threads, everywhere. I kept at medpsychmoss because medicine, because I'm a medical doctor, psychology, because I'm a psychiatry resident, and then my last name, Moss. So that's kind of the combination of who I am, of combining medicine, psychology into who I am in my story.
First of all, and before I forget to say this, congratulations, Dr. Stephanie, on your journey. Congratulations on what you have achieved. You know, what you've gone through in your journey is nothing short of remarkable. And how the way you are continuing to inspire others and motivate others in their own journey is just, a lovely journey to take. And I am honored and glad and grateful to have shared this platform for you to share that story of yours. Dr. Stephanie, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for allowing me to share my story.
To all our audience and listeners out there, once again, medpsychmoss.com. Go check that out. Go check out Dr. Stephanie's podcast as well. I'm definitely going to be listening to one or two episodes on there. Go check that out. YouTube, Spotify, everywhere you can find that podcast. Dr. Stephanie, one last bit of wisdom to leave behind our audience. What would it be? Take us home.
I always like to end my personal podcast, and I'm going to say it the same here, is that you are not alone. No matter what your struggle is, no matter what your challenge is mentally, physically, academically, in your job, I know it can feel so lonely. I've been there, but you're not. There are so many people out there that are similarly struggling. They are just not vocalizing it. So just if there's one thing that will keep you motivated to keep going today, is just to remember that you're not alone and that there are others who believe in you.
And there are others who share the same similar stories, and others who can share the same plight and understand you. And Dr. Stephanie is one of those people, and she shares her platform to similar people as well. Dr. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
To all our audience and listeners out there, thank you for watching this episode. We will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.